Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at 97-98 Fleer Basketball. This is one of the more distinctive cards of the 1990s, which is saying a lot, but it's distinctive in a fascinating way, really. In the mid to late 90s, Fleer and Skybox had been exploring with matte finishes on cards, as in literally for EXL, they made an actual mat. This is the same kind of mat that you use in framing. And they used it to frame cards. They played around with it in that set. And in 1996's Skybox Impact set, football, the Skybox Impact rookie set proper had a special set of all rookie team cards that were done very thin cardstock, a very firm but thin cardstock that had a whole matte finish, the texture of a matte finish on it. So this wasn't matte in terms of the ink process. This was literally a matte finish of a card, and it was a pretty fascinating thing that they did. What we didn't realize was that that was the precursor for the 1997 Fleer card releases. The cards themselves, they came out exactly the same way, and they were really pretty fascinating in a way, because when you do an actual matte texture for a card, the feel of it is just really engaging. And usually with a matte, there's kind of a consistent kind of feel to it. In this case, it has more of a rough feel, kind of like if you take granite and you sandblast it. It has all of these ridges, and it's a fascinating card to hold. It's just fascinating to hold. It really is. And this wasn't like the old cardboard from the 1980s. This actually had a different feel, like it was actually finished. Again, like sandblasting. So the distinction of these cards was beyond anything we could prepare for, and there were no cards like it. Now, these cards were tricky to work with because they kind of stuck together. So you couldn't flip through the cards with the same speed that a glossy card would have. But it didn't matter, just because this is one of those cards where when you have it in your hand, that's the collecting experience that you're getting. So it was a blast in that regard. And the cards, they were designed in a very simplistic way where it's a full bleed card, so this is all about the image. The image is the central quality of the card. It is the whole quality of the card, but because it doesn't have the glossy finish, the picture doesn't pop out. It doesn't stand out. Instead, it's the whole card that you're experiencing. And ironically, there is gold foil on the card. That's what all the text is. And the gold foil, it really doesn't distinguish itself. It doesn't stand out as a distinct element from the rest of the card. You would think that it normally would. Now, in larger portions, it does. So in basketball, they had their rookie cards, they had a little band of gold with rookie in it, and that did stand out. But the more gold foil that you got into the cards, the more distinctive it would be. So in football, this was really the right place for this to be, because the matte finish, or the matte feel of the card, that cardboard kind of quality, it kind of dilutes the whole image. But in football cards, you can kind of get away with it, and so the cards look good. In basketball, you need the glossy. You really do. You need the glossy finish in order for all the detail, all the rich detail of these really ink-heavy cards. The colors are very vibrant, and the darks are very much. You get these stadiums with these whole back areas that need to have that dark richness in order to really see the player almost lit within the middle of the card. You need that kind of balance in the card. They didn't quite have it. So they didn't have the same general feel as the football cards. But in basketball, they did play one trick that was really kind of interesting, which is that they had little award winner titles on it. So if you had, say, a league leader, or you had an all rookie team, or you had an all NBA player, those little marks would be put on the card, and so players had sometimes one, like Marcus Camby, or with John Stockton and Michael Jordan, they had 3 categories in each. And the categories were, it was all based upon league leaders or all-pro. That was real, or all-star, I should say. That's what they were. But having those little icons, those little badges stuck on there, was another little element that made it very distinctive, and it was a fun part of the card. So the card was, it was this interesting mess of, it was a great card, it was a fun card, it was not a perfect card, but it was one of those cards that is unlike anything else. I mean, nothing could compare to it, which gives it its own appreciation. It helps you to really enjoy the cards for the fact that this is the one opportunity to have these cards. But I did mention that these images work better with a glossy finish. And in basketball, that's very much the case. And thankfully, with the 97 Fleer sets, they gave us exactly that. for this set, they finally started doing parallels for Fleer. These parallels were done at 2 stages, so they had basically 3 copies of every card. Their parallels were called Tradition, and this is the name that would eventually be attributed to all base Fleer brands. Here it was just the parallel. And so the basic parallel was their Crystal Tradition. This is a fully glossy card, so it's a normal card thickness, so a little bit thicker than the main cards in the set, or the base cards in the set. And it's glossy on the front, glossy on the back, and they replaced all the gold foil with silver foil. But up in the top corner you can see Tradition Silver. There's that little emblem up there. They also, though, had a much more rare card, which was their Tiffany Tradition card. And Tiffany Tradition, they replaced all the gold or the silver foil with blue holofoil. So it's the same as the crystal card, it's just instead of silver foil, it's got the blue holofoil. That's the only difference. Otherwise, they are the same. So those 2 parallels, they have, in fact, it's not hard to find the Tiffany, but you could possibly slip over it and miss that it's the Tiffany card. If the lighting is just right, you might not notice it. Otherwise, it is pretty distinctive. But on the card back, they do actually say Crystal or Tiffany, so they make sure that they have it written on the front and written on the back. So that was the other thing they did for the set, but they didn't do anything else. I mean, they had no subsets in this. They did have 2 series. They released it in 2 series, but as far as the set itself, in this case, they just went with a straight run of cards, and it had been a long time since Fleer had done that. With this set, it actually works. This was a fun card set, just the way that it was. But this was also a time when they were still doing a lot of insert cards. And they did some interesting things even beyond that, starting off with the Millennium Moments. And Millennium Moments was a cross-brand release for Fleer. It was a contest. And so you had 45 cards in the basic set, and then they had another 5 cards that you are not going to get. So basically we were collecting 45 cards, and there was the contest, and it was interesting, but you ultimately wanted the blessed opportunity to get all 50. The cards are contest on the back, and on the front they have a picture of the player, a little bit of writing about the player, not much. That's basically about it, but these are super common. They were released in lots of different releases, and these were not rare. So they're common cards to have as a set. But they also did their Diamond Ink exchange cards. And this was fair, where they had cards released in packs that they're all embossed, and they have an emblem that looks kind of like Flair in a way. But they all have a number on it. They have a player and they have a number. And so the number is 1, 5, 10, or 25. And even on the back, it has the number there right over the whole little write-up about the contest. But the whole point is you're supposed to gather enough points of a player and then send it in to get an autographed basketball. That's basically the model for it. Obviously, these are exchange cards from a long time ago, so we're not going to be getting these autographed basketballs. Too bad. But we still get to collect a 4-tier set. So every single player has a 1, a 5, a 10, and a 25. Obviously, the 25s are really tough to get. The 1s are very easy to get. But you can collect either the whole set of all the players, or you can collect all of the different versions of one individual player. So a fun little thing that they did as well. Now, as for the inserts, like I said, there were no subsets in the set. So they still wanted to do the hardwood leaders, which means that they returned to what they had done back in 1995-96 by doing an insert set for hardwood leaders, and these were, again, Flair cards. And again, they were gorgeous cards. Here they got a little bit more professional with it. They're great cards, but again, it was the one player per team, just like they'd done in the previous 2 years, and it's an excellent way to begin talking about these inserts. But as far as the inserts, they did a number of really interesting. This was basically the year where they were kind of in competition with themselves for outdoing themselves insert by insert by insert. I mean, they would start doing this quite frequently, but this was the first set where you look and you really do feel like every time they made an insert card, they wanted this to be the distinctive insert card, because they came up with a lot of interesting ideas, starting with Game Breaker. Now, the Game Breaker cards from the previous year were acetate, which was a very unusual thing for Fleer to be doing. And so the cards had a distinctive quality because of that. In this case, they really upped the ante, and the cards, they have basically, it's like a lacquered finish. It's really, really unusual. And I think it's just the glossy nature of the basketball design in the back, but it does have a feel like it's lacquered. But also a big contribution to why it feels like it's lacquered is the fact that it's embossed. So the whole contours, the way that the glossy sheen comes off, the reflections of the light, all those components go together to make a really interesting card with two pictures of players that do not stand out on these cards. They kind of are buried in there. But as if all of that wasn't enough, they actually have some glitter on it. They have some muted gold. It's not glitter gold. It's a muted gold treatment with glitter on top of it. So the card has a little bit of liveliness. Basically, this is one of those cards that you just kind of explore because there are fascinating things about it. It's not the most eye-catching card overall, but it is a very engaging card. And so that's really fun. And these cards are kind of rare. So actually getting your hands on one of these, this is one of those cards where after you do all the work to get one of these, it's kind of worth it. Not kind of worth it, but it is a fun card. They also did another Decade of Excellence set. So in 96-97, they celebrated the fact that the numbers lined up with 86-87. And they made reprints of their original 86-87 cards, and then they did reimaginings of what rookie cards would have looked like for various players who had been in the league for the full 11 years, or full 10 to 11 years that we were looking at. And so that was a neat thing they did there. Well, why wouldn't they do it in the next year? Well, they did do something. They did something similar in 97-98. So they looked back, obviously, at the 87-88 cards. Those are the ones they looked at. They used the exact same card design, again, like the previous year. These are modern card stocks. They're glossy. They have little gold foil saying Decade of Excellence. But instead of being reprints, these are completely new cards. I mean, completely new. So the design may be the same, but Akeem Olajuwon, this is what his original card looked like. This is what his new card looked like. So you can see they're different. But more importantly, when you look on the back, hey, it's modern statistics. So you have the full run of the player's career. So this is more of a look back at the player for the entire run of Fleer's existence. That's really kind of what they went with. But that doesn't mean that the card fronts are modern shots of players. In fact, as you can see from Kevin Johnson, they still did it in the same way of, well, what if this was his rookie card or his card from that time? So Kevin Johnson, John Stockton, Akeem Olajuwon, these are still cards that are intended to be kind of like they were from the time, and yet from a new time. And I really like how these retro cards worked, how they did it. I think it was a lot of fun, and I think it was a really good follow-up to the previous year. Now, there are only 12 cards in the set. So the previous year they did a whole bunch because they packed a bunch into Series 1 and into Series 2. There are less cards in this year, but hey, that's perfectly fine. The cards they do have are really cool. Then they also did their Franchise Futures card, and this is another one of those fun ones that's supposed to grab your eye, and this one is more eye-grabbing. It has brushed metal all over the card back, and so there's a lot of light play that goes on, but they also die cut it on the side, which makes it a very distinctive card. So it's a cool little combination of all of this stuff. This is more like the mid-90s Fleer, where they were coming up with a bunch of really fun stuff, but they weren't putting together a really clean package. But that's fine, because it is a fun card. The problem is, because it's die cut on one side, this is a tough card to work with, so it's one that can easily slip out of your hands when you have multiple cards. So it's kind of tricky in that way. Otherwise, it's well worth it. They also did their Gowdy cards here in this set. So like in football, they did an actual release of Gowdy cards. These are modern cards designed in the style of the old Gowdy cards. And it was a complete set of modern players, modern stats, etc., just done in the old style, with a similar card stock to the way that it had been done back in the time of Gowdy. Well, in basketball, I don't know why, but they didn't bother to do a whole set. Instead, they just did a 15-card insert set here with their main Fleer release. It's fine. These are cool little cards. And in a way, I kind of wish they'd done something really big with, say, the 1961 card set for a whole set. I mean, they would do something similar, so that would come up. But it is fun to look at these cards and just kind of imagine what an entire set would have been like. But regardless, this is a neat little card set that they did, just 15 cards, and because it's basketball, they have a lot of really rich colors, which is just kind of standard for all these cards. So they feel very different from what you would see in another sport. But this was all they did for this. And then they had another fairly distinctive card in Key Ingredients. And in this case, this is a foil card. Almost everything is foil, which is okay. It has some embossing, which is a whole lot better. It makes it really kind of cool, but it's only kind of cool. It's not great. But that's perfectly fine because this set was all about a parallel, which was their Key Ingredients gold, or their gold Key Ingredients, however you want to word it. And in this case, this is an acetate card, completely acetate. No embossing. It has gold foil around the outside, and you can see all the details in the inside that are designed into the main card that they don't enunciate. Well, here that is the enunciation, and then it's almost like a stained glass window, a gold stained glass window behind the player. So, interestingly enough, this is a case where there is a lot of interest to the main card, but you don't really care. But the parallel is so distinctive. It's a really impressive card. And I had a lot of fun collecting this set. Well, okay, technically I'm still having fun collecting the set because I'm not quite done with it yet. But the gold cards are really cool. And it's good to have both of them, but really the parallel is the one that you're going after here. Now, for a card that's not quite as flashy, we've got the Rookie Rewind. And this is a set that never really quite figured out what it was going to be. It never created its own distinct quality. It was kind of like an afterthought they kind of threw over on the side. And this, to me, is the highlight of the Rookie Rewind lineage. This is a matte finish card. It is not a card with a matte texture. This is just, in terms of the ink, this is a matte finish. And then it has foil elsewhere on the card, so the foil kind of pops out. The card is not distinctive. It doesn't jump out. It doesn't grab hold of you. But it is a really nice card, and it has kind of a cool quality that you kind of want to explore. Now, the Rookie Sensations are a little bit more distinctive, and this has been a hit and miss card set pretty much all through Fleer. And this is one of those years where it's more of a miss, but at least it has a really nice quality to it that makes it's not a disappointment. It's not a great card, but it's a good card. It's a good enough card, and so it kind of works. It's flashier than the Rookie Rewind, but it's not as well polished. It's not as well finished as the Rewind cards. Then they have Soaring Stars, and this is a card where the big distinction about this card is the fact that the background, it's not quite a matte finish, but it has kind of an iridescent quality, slight iridescent quality. There's almost like a glowing quality where the strength of the color kind of changes over time, which is kind of interesting, but there's nothing about it that really grabs you. But fortunately, this is another case where they do have a parallel. And in this case, the parallel has embossing. So it's kind of the opposite of what they had done with Key Ingredients. But also, not just the embossing of the card, but they also have silver foil on the card. So it's a combination of the two. And so in this case, unlike Key Ingredients, this is a great case where you want to get both cards. You want to get the base and you want to get the parallel and get the two of them next to each other to really show the contrast. And that's really where the strength of these cards are. So this is more about the fun of collecting both sets. But if you really want a truly, truly, truly distinctive card in this set, you got to go with Thrillseeker. And the Thrillseeker cards this is basically an EXL card. That's exactly what it is. With EXL cards, if you haven't seen the video that I did on it, they used a matte trim around the outside, as in they literally matted their cards. So they had two plies, and they had an image, and then they had matte around the outside. And they played tricks in the inserts with where the matting would go and where they would have the glossy, which was usually on the opposite side. Well, this is exactly a part of that family. This is a trim around the outside of matte, and then they have a player that is also in matte, a matte finish over the whole player. So the player's not glossy. He actually has the matte finish, basically just like in the card set. So really kind of an intriguing quality, and then of course glossy on the back. But what's really distinctive about this card is the fact that within that window, in the background, it's kind of a 3D effect of all these kind of like rings that are moving around. And so the card has textural interest, and it also has the interest of just kind of moving it around and exploring it. So this is a really, really interesting card, kind of like with Game Breakers, where it's really tough to get. When you get one, you go, okay, all right, yeah, that was almost worth it. That's kind of the quality. So it is kind of cool. Then they have an interesting case with Total O, where this is a card that there should be nothing good about it, and yet there's something kind of intriguing. This has a very iridescent quality. So the card itself, there's kind of a reflective quality in it, and you kind of want to explore it a little bit. Because of how muted the background is, it doesn't have the jump right out and make a statement feel that it otherwise could. But it has a whole different feel, where this is a card where you actually take a minute and you explore it a bit. You only take a minute, you kind of move on, but it's actually not too bad. And this is a case where this card has its own reason to kind of stand out among all of these insert cards. And then another way of standing out, we have Tower of Power, another one of these standard bearers of Fleer over the years. In this case, the thing about this card that is so distinctive is the fact that it is actually a fold open card. That's what it is. So the card is a normal size card, but when you open it up, it becomes double size with the image of the player inside. And so that is the thing about this card. There's really nothing else to it other than the die cutting on the outside, but it's intended to be interactive. And so it's like they came up with every single different idea that they possibly could, and this was the fold open version of all of their ideas. And then the only other set to talk about is Zone. And this is, I really want to talk about this card a lot because it has kind of a holofoil quality to it. It has some kind of interesting things, but unfortunately with all of the flashy stuff that's come before, it's just kind of there at the end. I mean, it's good, but it's not great. So that's kind of the tail end of it. But it was an interesting idea for the main set. It had a couple of fun parallels to chase, and then they had a whole bunch of crazy ideas for all of their inserts. And that made it a really fun year for Fleer, but it was also a transition year. This was the year where they went from just making a basic set and then a bunch of inserts to making a set that had a lot of chase cards at the base level and really emphasizing that. And I'll be looking at those at a different time. I think that's enough for talking about with this video. So in terms of this, I definitely hope that you learned some stuff. Check out my other videos if you haven't had a chance, including the Emotion EXL video, since there's a little bit of, that's kind of a precursor to this. And then subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.